Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Retire Life Ready. Today's episode is the audio taken from a seminar that I ran in our office in Melbourne a couple of weeks ago. Whenever I post online that I'm going to run a seminar, people all over the country ask me to stream it online, to come and visit them in their particular location, to record it, to do all of these kind of things. So this time around I recorded the audio. Bear in mind that this presentation goes along with a set of slides, so at different points in time you're going to have to use your imagination. The audio wasn't intended to be a podcast, it's a presentation for people to see in person. So please keep that in mind. For those that are in Sydney, I will be in Sydney towards the end of October running some seminars. So on Wednesday, the 29th of October, I'll be running a lunchtime and an evening seminar. And then on Thursday, the 30th of October in the evening, my book goes live. Dimix Sydney is going to host a book launch event. Please look out online for ways that you can register for those events. This podcast is not financial advice. It does not take into account your personal circumstances or situation. If you do require financial advice, you should seek that from a licensed financial advisor. Do not act on things discussed in the podcast. Look, thank you all for coming in this evening. It's getting cold and dark out there, but we certainly do appreciate you showing up. Look, thanks for coming in. My name's James Wrigley. You've no doubt seen a few of my videos and bits and pieces on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and some of these kind of places. It blows me away that so many people would want to come in and listen to me talk about superannuation and retirement and those kind of seemingly boring topics, but lots of people want to know about it. Because of your attendance and the group that was in around lunchtime, we've raised a couple of $1,000s that will be donated to fight MND. So we appreciate you coming along. We ask for people to pay the $20 to kind of get a bit of a commitment for people to show up, and then we end up with a full room of people. So look, thank you for coming along. I'm sure that money will be well appreciated. First Financial. So most of you will have seen some of my videos that I put online. I'm just one of very many people that work here. It just, as I said, it kind of blows me away how many people would come and show up to something like this. But I also can't believe how many people follow the videos that I put online. I just started doing it because I just wanted to do it, and it's grown to where it's gotten to. I'm one of about 100 people that work here at First Financial. So as far as financial advice businesses go, it's a pretty big financial advice business. We're one of the bigger ones in Melbourne. Whether that means anything to you or not, it is what it is. As it says there on the slides, we've been around for a long time. So kind of 30 odd years, different names, different ownership structures, but we have been around for a long time. There are a lot of clients that we work with that have been with us for 20 odd years. And when you work with clients for that long, you eventually end up at a point where you start to go to some of their funerals. And so we tend to look to work with clients and partner with clients for a very long time. 20, 30 years is not uncommon. And as I said, we end up going to 80 and 90-year-olds funerals as part of that. Rob works on the Acambo side of the business, which is our investment management side of the business. We manage through that side of the business and through some different means that we do so, in excess of about $5 billion worth of assets for clients, primarily their retirement savings. So that's kind of taken pretty seriously when you're looking at people's life savings and their retirement savings. Onto the presentation itself. So I get a lot of questions online. We get a lot of questions just from people coming in saying, hey James, I'm certain years old. I've got $600,000 in my superannuation fund. Can I afford to retire? And in a roundabout way, I have to nicely say I have no idea if you're going to be able to afford to retire. What is it that you actually want to do in your retirement, and where do you want to live, and what are you going to spend, and all of those kind of things. So I wanted to start this part of the presentation with getting you to start to think about some of these things. As it says at the top of the screen there, design the retirement you aspire to. We would really love to be working with people that are designing a particular retirement that they're aspiring to and then putting in place things to work towards that, rather than coming in saying, hey James, I retired yesterday, I've got this much money in my super fund, this much money in my bank account, what can I do? And that's sometimes that means that they can do the things that they want to do, and other times you're going, oh God, I wish I saw you 5 or 10 years ago. It could have been such a different place. So please kind of leave this presentation with the first thing, thinking about what it is that you actually want to do. You're going to need to have something to keep your mind going, keep you occupied. There's an old financial advice colleague of mine used to use the phrase, no, let me get this right. He'd say, during your working life, leisure or holidays is a break from the routine of your working life. But what's going to be the break from leisure time when all of your time is leisure time when you're retired? Like you need something to get you out of bed. You need a sense of purpose, a connection, these kind of things. So whether it's community groups and church groups, getting involved with your kids and grandkids and schools and all the rest of it, but you need something to get you out of bed and keep you going. And then that extends to, where do you want to live? How do you want to live? Do you want to travel? Don't you want to travel? All of these kind of things. So start by designing that first, and then the numbers will hopefully start to flow from there. As it says on the screen, we tend to see 3 main phases of someone's retirement, and this is written plenty in a whole lot of financial literature. You may have seen, read books or listened to podcasts and the like on the topic. But those 3 areas, and we see this time and time again with all the clients that we work with, there's this active stage of someone's retirement. Now, if you're retiring around age 60, a pretty typical retirement, these active years we tend to see last from about early 60s through until about early to mid 70s. And by that, the big thing there is often people looking to try and travel whilst they're still fit and able to and want to see the world. And they can deal with the flight time to get from anywhere outside of Australia because we're so far away from large parts of the world. So regardless of someone's assets, we tend to start to see the international travel really start to slow down from about mid-70s onwards. They've ticked off the things that they want to see. They can't be bothered with the flight time. Even though they may be flying business class, it still starts to take a toll, and so things really start to slow down. But as you have this active stage, and that tends to be the highest expense period of your retirement too, is you're out and about and doing things. Then you enter this more passive stage. That's typically from that kind of early 70s through until early 80s. The overseas travel well and truly starts to slow down. Maybe it's replaced with a little bit more domestic travel, or for us down here in Victoria, you head up to Queensland for 3 months like my grandparents used to do and escape the cold. So we see that a lot. Hitch up the caravan and go touring around Australia. But it's a bit more passive, tends to cost a little bit less, and tends to last for that 10 or so years from kind of early 70s to early 80s. And then you enter these more frail years where your health tends to start to decline. That's often from kind of early 80s onwards, and then you start to get into the whole aged care system. So whether it's home care and meals at home and all the rest of it, or you end up in the residential aged care system. So we have a particular piece of advice that we do provide to clients and their families. Often it's the 60-something-year-old children of the 80-something-year-old parents where they're helping to try and get mum and dad into aged care. We help with a specific piece of advice around how do you make best use of someone's finances to deal with that. Now, the final comment that I'll make on these kind of 3 stages is retirement lasts a very long time, a very, very long time. So if you're retiring around age 60 or so, you have every chance of living probably until some point around age 90. So it's another whole half of your life again in retirement. Back to what I was saying before, like you need something to do, you need a purpose, you need to find some friends and things to spend that time with. So you'll likely spend a whole third of your life in retirement, half of your life up until those 60s again in retirement. So it is a very long time, and we would love to see you designing the retirement that you aspire to, not just having to live the retirement that you just end up with based on what might have happened. So once we've got a sense of what it is that you want to do and how you want to live and how you're going to surround yourself and all of these kind of things that I've been talking about, we can now start to have a look at some of the numbers that are involved with retirement. And now the starting point for there is just trying to take stock of where are you at today. And you'll notice there's a table here on the screen. You've all got the slides on your seats, where we'd look at what we call your lifestyle assets. So your house, your holiday home, cars, contents, motorbikes, toys, boats, all of these kind of things that different people have. The thing with these lifestyle assets, they're all nice to have, and they'll give you some form of satisfaction and enjoyment of some variety by having all of these things. But if you have too much money in these kind of things, it actually holds you back from retirement.
Like, your holiday home might be really nice, but if you've got $2 million tied up in your holiday home, that's $2 million less that you don't have in other things that could have otherwise supported your retirement. And so we do come across from time to time people that come into the office here and they're really proud about telling us, what their asset position is and how wealthy they may be. But then when you dig underneath the surface, most of it's tied up in these things, and they've got a couple $100,000 in their super fund, but a $3 million house and a $2 million holiday home and a $150,000 Mercedes in the driveway. And you say, oh, there's nothing to actually live off. So, work through this and say, well, what are the assets that you have from a lifestyle perspective? What are they worth, and what debt do you have associated with each of those assets? So if you've got a debt on your own home, if you've got a debt on your holiday home, these kind of things. The next step is then to look at what we call the nest egg assets. So the nest egg assets, these are the things that will help you retire. They're the cash savings, they're the investment properties, they're the super fund balances. They're the business, if you own and operate a business, that you may be able to sell. Now, some people own and operate a business, and when we talk to them, they, in a roundabout way, say, once I decide to stop working, I kind of close the door and walk away. There isn't really a sellable asset here, and that may be the case for some people. But then there's others that own and operate businesses where there is a bit of a market that they can sell it on to someone else, and that may be some money that you can get in. But same thing, it's this. What is the value of all of those assets that you have? Are there any debts associated with any of those assets that you do have from a nest egg assets perspective? And then we get to this formula down the bottom here. Now we love numbers and we love a formula in financial advice. And you'll see at the bottom of the screen, or it's on your slides there. We want to determine something that we call net nest egg assets. So that's the nest egg assets that you've got here, the super fund balance and the savings and the investment properties and all of these kind of things, your investments, less any debts that you have associated with them, less any debts that you have with the lifestyle assets. So if you have a debt on your own home, for example, it's going to be pretty difficult to retire if you've still got a debt on your own home that's outstanding. So we want to subtract all of those things off what we call the nest egg assets, and we get to this idea of what we call net nest egg assets. You'll get a number to say, where am I at from an asset position minus all of my debts? This is the money that I have available to help support my retirement. Does that make a bit of sense to there? So we've got the first part is what do you actually want to do and where you're going to live and all of those kind of things, designing your lifestyle. Second part is just making sense of where are you at today. And then we can start to move on to, well, where is it that you need to get to? And the starting point with that, I made reference to the comments and messages and things that I get from people online where they say, James, I'm 61 years old, I've got $600,000 in my super fund, can I afford to retire? And I have to say back to them, I have no idea if you can afford to retire. Primarily, it's because I have no idea how much that person wants to spend in retirement. The biggest influence on whether you can afford to retire or not is ultimately how much do you plan on spending. Now, when we pose this question to people to say, how much do you think you want to spend in retirement? Most of the time, people will turn around and say, I don't know, what do other people spend? We're just normal, we live an average life, what are other people spending? Now, when you're faced with that, I don't know type response, there's a couple of exercises that we go through, but we can also look to some studies and things that are done. So there's a group called ASFA, and I'd encourage you all to have a look at this afterwards. I've put the link to their particular website at the bottom of this slide. But there's a report that's published, I think it's every quarter or every 6 months or so. ASFA, it's an Australian industry body in kind of financial services. They released this study that they call the Retirement Income Standard. And they survey a range of different people and they come up with a particular number that they think people are spending in retirement. And they look at that for a single person, they look at that for a couple, and they look at that for what they call a comfortable retirement and also what they call a modest retirement. And you'll see the numbers there. So they say for a single person living a comfortable retirement, they think they spend about $52,000, $53,000 a year. For a couple, it's nearly $74,000 a year. Now, the thing with looking at any of these types of studies and listening to any videos, pointing at myself and anyone else that you might look at and books and things that you read, you need to understand what do they describe as a comfortable retirement? Because what you describe as a comfortable retirement and what they describe as a comfortable retirement might be completely different things. ASFA's definition of a comfortable retirement is travelling overseas once every 7 years in your retirement. I got exactly that same reaction at lunchtime, and so we see it time and time again. The most common definition of a comfortable retirement that we see from clients is being able to travel overseas once a year for at least the first 10 years of someone's retirement. Back to that kind of active stage that I was talking about before. Now, if I say, well, what does that cost and what do we typically see people spending? A couple, for example, in that, and a single, it's slightly less, but albeit only slightly. It doesn't cost a whole lot less to operate a household with one person versus two. We tend to see that couple spending about $80,000 a year just on the day-to-day living, paying the bills, paying the insurance and eating out for dinner every now and then, a little bit of domestic travel and so forth. And then there's the overseas holidays on top of that. And so we tend to see a typical comfortable, what we would describe as a comfortable retirement for a couple costing about $120,000 a year. Increasingly, and this is more of a Sydney thing than it is a Melbourne thing, but that heading towards $150,000 a year. So that's a big difference between what ASFA's saying and what we're saying. So I guess the point that I wanted to make here is if you are looking at any of these studies, please look at them and have a look at what's there. But look at the detail of what they're describing as a comfortable retirement versus what you've designed for your retirement, back to that very first slide. Now, the bit that's chopped off here, now sorry, the projector's a little bit skewed and you can see it on your slides, but this part that's chopped off here on the left-hand side, this says, so going back to the ASFA details, if you were living off this type of income in retirement, a fair portion of that, you'd be able to support yourself with a lot of age pension support and a little bit of your own money is kind of what they're saying here. So for a single person, I think it says 29,000. The couple, it's about 43 or 45,000, something like that. So of this 74,000, 44 or 45 of that could potentially be funded from the age pension. That brings up another issue. Does anyone know when you can get the age pension? How old do you need to be to get the age pension? Yep. Now, if you're aspiring to retire at age 60, what are you going to do between age 60 and age 67 if you're just relying on these numbers alone? If you're relying on $45,000 a year of your retirement coming from the age pension, but you can't get that for another 7 years, you're going to put a pretty decent dent in your super fund if you haven't prepared appropriately for it. All right, so we tend to see comfortable about 120. ASFA has a different view on their definition of comfortable. Now, what does that mean then in terms of what you actually need to be able to fund that? So this is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. We've gone through what are you doing for your retirement, how much are you going to spend, what are the level of assets and things that you've got, but where do you actually need to get that to? And so we use this idea of the rule of 20 times, as it says at the top there. Now, this is the aspirational level that we try and encourage people to get to. A number of people get there, a lot of people don't, but as close as possible is kind of best. And what this says is you take this annual spending number, what are you aspiring to spend in your retirement? Maybe it's the $80,000 a year that was on the slide before, maybe it's the 120 that I was talking about, maybe it's some other number, whatever it is that you want to do. We're going to multiply that by 20 times. So if it was $100,000 a year that you wanted to spend, multiply that by 20, we get 2 million. If it was 150, you want 3 million. You kind of get the idea. That's the type of target of net nest egg assets that you want to try and be aspiring to. So your own home paid off, and then this 20 times whatever you're planning on spending in retirement in the investment assets pool to be able to fund that. Now, I said it's this kind of aspirational level. If you can get to that 20 times number, you're highly, highly, highly unlikely to run out of money through your retirement, and you're actually highly likely to die with as much money intact as what you actually had when you first retired. And then so for those people that have this,
Sorry, is your family home not included?
Excluding your family home. Yeah, so you've got to live somewhere, whether it's a $500,000 house or a $5 million house. That's a lifestyle decision that you're going to make. Does nothing to help you retire unless you sell the $5 million house and downsize. But yeah, it's these assets outside of the value of your own home. If you can get to this 20 times number, the maths then says if you invest that money reasonably well, you get an average return of 7, 8 odd %, like a pretty standard super fund. You'll spend some of that money each year living. The remainder will remain invested and will continue to compound and grow over time, so that you've got lots of money to live a very long life and happy life and do all of those things that you want to do in retirement. Now, as I said, not everyone gets there. Some people do, certainly, some people beyond, but not everyone. The final point there, point 3, there is a calculator on the Money Smart website. So Money Smart is a government body, government organisation. There's a calculator on their website called the Retirement Planner, where you can put in some of your details, your super balance and your income and things like that when you're aspiring to retire. And it'll then do a calculation and give you a bit of an estimate of what they think you can afford to spend based on what you've got now and what you might build over the coming few years until you do eventually retire. The thing to remember with the Money Smart website, or the thing to point out, because it's not easily identifiable, this calculator is built on you spending all of your money. So you're kind of dying with nothing. You have your house, but nothing else. And so for some people, that's fine, back to this kind of designing the retirement that you want. And for other people, that's not fine. So you need to work out what it is that you're trying to do and make the money decisions around that. Now, a few more slides from me before I hand over to Rob. This is kind of Centrelink in your retirement. So I had on that earlier slide where I was talking about ASFA and retirement income standards, and I said you can partly funded by the age pension, those kind of things. This table here looks at what, at the very bottom, what the full rate of age pension is for a single person. It's around $30,000 at the moment. The full rate of age pension for a couple is around $45,000 a year at the moment. So if we go back to that, if you wanted the $80,000 a year to live off, or the 120 that I said, a lot of people aspire to get the full age pension for a single person, for example, you have to have assets outside of the value of your own home of under $320,000. For a couple, it's under $481,500 outside of the value of your own home. So that's your super fund balance, your cash balance, your car, your contents, your jewellery, all of these things that you own, except for the value of your own home. I get a lot of questions about, well, what if I put money in a trust or a company? Is that smart? Is that going to help me with Centrelink? And Centrelink's one step ahead of you. They count all of those things too. So it's everything that you own. And you'd have to have under these levels to get the full age pension. Now, a couple can get, think of it like $1.50 a fortnight of age pension, to an asset level of just a touch over $1 million, as you can see here. $1,059,000 is the cutoff limit for a couple. Now, you're not getting the full age pension. As I said, you're getting $1.50 a fortnight, $2 a fortnight, that kind of thing, next to nothing. So for those people that think it's a great idea for them to give away all of their money, because the only way to, for some people to get this age pension is to give away a whole lot of money. But if they were going to give away a whole lot of money, but then at the same time you want to live $120,000 a year retirement income, the maths just doesn't work. You can't possibly give away enough money to get the full age pension and spend $120,000 a year and expect your money to last forever, unless your kids are going to give it back to you over time. So it just doesn't work. So the age pension's there for those that qualify, and there's a lot of strategies that we put in place to try and maximise age pension benefits if that is something that's relevant for people. Now, for those that have too much in the way of assets to qualify for an age pension, there is still some support you can get from Centrelink, and it's through the healthcare card system. So there's 2 healthcare cards, the low income card and the Commonwealth Seniors healthcare card. The Commonwealth Seniors card, you need to be at least age pension age, so 67, like we were talking about before, to get that one. And there's an income test that they look at. And for the low income healthcare card, there is no age requirement. So you could be 40 years old, and if your income was low enough, you'd get the card. You get access to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme and some discounts off some other bits and pieces. In the event that the government decides to stimulate the economy like they did during COVID, they give those stimulus payments to the Commonwealth Seniors healthcare card holders, not the low-income healthcare card holders. So if you can qualify for both, we say qualify for both. Just put in the application for both through Centrelink. Now, these are the income limits, annual income limits over here on the right-hand side. So they look at income from work and bits and pieces like that you do. From financial investments, cash in the bank and super, they do something called deeming. So they don't care what you actually earn or what you actually spend from your super, for example. They just assume you earn 2.25% interest on the balance of your super funds. So it's a pretty low number. So having said that, if you have all of your money in superannuation, these numbers at the bottom of the screen here, you can have a really healthy superannuation balance and still qualify for some of these benefits. So the low-income healthcare card, a single person can still get that if they've got $1.8 million in super. They're not going to be living it's not going to be a very low income that they're living off if they've got that much money, but they meet the definition. A couple, it's 3.1. And then the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare Card, it gets even higher. So a single person can have nearly $4.5 million in super and still qualify for that card. A couple, it's 7 million. So we're talking some pretty serious dollars there in terms of super and retirement savings, and still get some healthcare card support. There's no regular payment, there's no fortnightly payment, but there is the card. Now, the last couple of things that I'm going to talk about before I hand over to Rob, it's just some of the building blocks around preparing for retirement. So we've kind of been on this journey of what do you want to do and how much you're going to spend and how much do you need to have for your retirement. A big part of funding retirement is super, and if you're not already kind of using super as best you can, I'd encourage you to maybe make some changes on that front, particularly if you're 50-something years old. So for anyone that's followed me for a little while, you might have seen me do a video of this kind of thing, just explaining superannuation. I wanted to do it with you now for those in the audience, and you can ask some questions and things when we get to the questions time at the end. But so superannuation, you want to think of that like a bucket, all right? Money gets into your superannuation fund one of two ways. For those that are working as an employee, there's some money that goes in as part of your wages. Your employer has to contribute 12% of your income to super. At the moment, it's been increasing over the last few years. It's at 12%. There's a limit on this left-hand side of $30,000 a year that your employer, that you can contribute to superannuation on what's called a concessional basis. If your super balance is under $500,000, there is a scheme where you can catch up previous year's limits and claim it all as a tax deduction in the current year. They're called the carry forward amounts. But this money, when it goes into superannuation, it goes in pre-tax. So you're either doing this salary sacrifice, or your employer's putting this money in for you, or you're voluntarily putting money into super and claiming a tax deduction for it. This money goes into super for most people. It's taxed at 15%. If you earn over $250,000 a year, you'll pay a slightly higher tax rate at 30%. But either way, for the vast majority of people, putting money into superannuation is a tax saving versus taking that as a wage, spending money into their bank account. Now, there's a separate set of rules around what we describe as your own money. So if you've got some cash savings in the bank, if you've got some inheritance, if you sold a property, all of these kind of things, wherever money may have come from, you can put up to $120,000 a year into superannuation of your own after-tax money that you've got sitting in a bank account or wherever it may be. Or you can use the current year plus the next couple of years and put in up to $360,000 in one go. This money, when it goes into superannuation, is not taxed on the way in. So it goes in completely tax-free, and that's to recognise that you've probably paid some tax on that money already to have it in your bank account in the first place. So some pretty generous numbers on this side. And then if you get the timing right around the end of a financial year, you could put $120,000 in June and $360,000 in July, and then in the space of a fortnight, you've put $480,000 into super. Then if you've got a partner, your partner could have done the same thing. And so within a fortnight, but between a couple, you can get pretty close to sticking $1 million into your superannuation fund completely tax-free. And we do that a lot with clients that have, as I said, got an inheritance, or they've downsized, or they've sold an asset or something like that. The whole point of putting money into super is to eventually help fund your retirement, but whilst it's in there and you're working and adding to it, it's in what's called the accumulation phase. So your balance is taxed at 15%. The earnings on your balance are taxed at 15%, far lower than the tax rate that most people pay on income that they earn themselves. Once you're over the age of 60 and you've retired, you can start to draw out a pension, P for pension. couple of things change here. This tax rate here disappears and it goes to 0 on the first $2 million. So if you've done a really good job of contributing to super and your investments have done well and you've got more than $2 million in super, you can only have $2 million in this pension phase. Anything else has to stay in the accumulation phase. The government's talking about trying to introduce a tax for higher super balances, and we'll kind of park that for another day. We won't go into that in too much detail tonight. But you get the point here where you can have a lot of money, $2 million, and this is per person. So again, if it was a couple, it could be 4 million, where you're not paying any tax on any of the earnings of that money, nor are you paying any tax on the money that's paid out to you. So it comes out to you entirely tax-free. So if we go back to a couple of slides when we're talking about how much do you want to spend in retirement, if you think your retirement is going to cost you $120,000 a year, if you're funding the vast majority of that from your superannuation fund, you don't have to worry about tax anymore. But if you've got all of these investment properties and shares and all these other bits and pieces in your own name that's generating an income, you do have to worry about paying tax. So say that you might have to earn $180,000 to pay $60,000 in tax to have $120,000 of spending money left over. And then if we go back to that 20 times number, if you need $180,000 to pay some tax, you need that much more in the investments in the first place. So superannuation is a great way of saving a whole lot of tax, but it also means you can fund a retirement with a whole lot less money than you otherwise would have if it was all sitting outside of the super system. Now, there's some minimums around how much you have to take out. I won't go into that in a whole lot of detail at the moment, but the final point that I want to make on here is once you are retired and over the age of 60, you have full unrestricted access to your superannuation balance. So the concern about, I can't touch this money, I'm not going to be able to get it and all the rest of it, it doesn't exist. Once you get to 60 and you're retired, if you wanted to take your $2 million out of your super fund and go and spend it tomorrow morning, good luck to you, go and spend it. Then the last slide, I just need to get the mouse to come across here. Where am I gone? Get this to click over. So then this last one is just how we recommend going about investing to help fund retirement. Now, this is another one where I'm going to draw something and explain as I'm going, but it's what we call 3 buckets. So we start this part of the conversation by saying, how much is it that you want to spend in retirement? You've designed this ideal retirement, where you're going to live, what you're going to do, all of these activities, what's it going to cost you? Call it XX, doesn't matter what it is for the time being. Then we say, so these 3 buckets, as much as possible, we want to have this inside of your superannuation fund. This isn't taking money out of super, and there's some questions in the earlier session about do we take the money out of super to make this work? No's the answer. We want to try and keep it in super as much as we can. But we want to have around 1 year's worth of whatever you're spending in cash, C for cash. Next bucket along is your term deposits, interest earning investments, sometimes called bonds. Sometimes it is a 6-month term deposit with Commonwealth Bank or whatever it may be.
Is this the day you retire? Or?
As you're getting towards retirement, not necessarily today. Well, this still holds true, but it's based on, where's my mouse gone? I've lost it, there it is. This is based on what is your need for income from your superannuation fund, for example, today or in the next couple of years. So if you're going to retire in the next couple of years, you'd probably want to be starting to look at doing this, but if you're 10 years off, you're probably not. Don't need to worry quite so much about having so much in cash right now. Then we want to have 3 to 4, get this to work, there it goes, 3 to 4 years worth of whatever it is that you're planning on spending in this term deposit type bucket. And then the last one, just do G for growth, and this pen's not working quite so well anymore for some reason. The rest of your money goes down the end here in the growth bucket. So this is the shares and the investment properties and all of these kind of assets that are hopefully going to continue to grow for you over time so that your money lasts a long time through retirement. Then as you earn income off your term deposits, we want that paid out as cash. As you earn dividends and rent and whatever makes up this last bucket, we want that paid out as cash. So that if you're trying to get to this 20 times number that I was referring to before, if you can get to that kind of level and your money's invested reasonably well, you've got a pretty high likelihood that you're going to just be living off the income that your investments are generating rather than the selling of the investments. The issue with the selling of the investments is eventually you're going to have sold them all and then there's nothing left to continue to pay you an income. But if you can set yourself up in a way where you're not selling, Commonwealth Bank will pay you a dividend this year and next year and the year after and the year after. Sure, it might vary a little bit, but you're going to keep getting that dividend or you're going to keep getting that rent from the property. So when you've got share markets that, my mouse is gone again. When you've got share markets that do this kind of thing, Trump decides to tariff the world and sends it down, and then we kind of go back up and down and we do all of these kind of things. What we're really, really trying to do here is buy you time to avoid being a forced seller of investments as things are going down. Because eventually, retirement's going to last 30 odd years. At some point, probably 2 or 3 times during that retirement, you're going to have to suffer a GFC type event. You're going to have a big downturn in your shares and the investments that you own. We don't want you to panic and sell out at the wrong time. You're going to do a whole lot of damage. Whereas if you can set yourself up in this way, where you're not selling, you're living off the income as much as possible. And if you did need a top up, you can take a little bit of the cash or you can take a little bit of your term deposits and leave your Commonwealth Bank shares to recover for another day. Ideally, we don't want you selling those at all. So this 3-bucket approach is the way that we look to start to move people as they head towards retirement. Now, you can't do this in every super fund. It's only certain super funds that you can get to this level of detail in. And some of the industry super funds you can kind of halfway get here, not all the way. But there's other super structures and things that we'll often use to get to that. That's it from me for the moment. So we absolutely factor in the age pension, but it starts with what is the retirement that you want to lead, and we then want to bring that down to what dollars are you planning on spending. And so the more dollars that you're planning on spending, the less reliance that you need to have on the age pension. So that the slide that's there around the assets that you need to have the full age pension, for example, I keep coming back to this number of $120,000, and it'll be whatever it is for you in the audience. But if you're wanting to spend $120,000 a year, the full age pension for a couple is only $45,000 a year. That's a huge gap that needs to be filled. And the assets that you would have to qualify for a full age pension, you'd run out of money in probably 6 or 7 years if you're spending $120,000 a year and getting the full age pension. And so as part of our plans, we do some financial projections and financial modelling, but the higher that income need is for someone, therefore the higher assets that they need to have, therefore the less likely they are to qualify for the age pension. But having said that, we have a lot of clients that are very comfortable living off a part age pension and part their own money, and they do live off $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and they live the most amazing retirements, that they do all the things that they want to do. So it's not for me to tell you what to do. We want to just try and support you to do the things that you want to do. Yeah, so whatever the number is, it's today. And then if we use that rule of 20 times, when I say how much should you try and aspire to get to, and it might be a big stretch for a lot of people to get there. Not a whole lot of people actually do. But if you can get to that 20 times number, the way the maths works is you assume you earn 7 or 8% return on however much money you have. If it's this 20 times, it means that you're spending 5% of that return every year. So say you earned 8, you spend 5, the other 3 remains invested to help deal with inflation over time. That covers your 2 or 3% inflation every year. And so when you look at how much money does someone have, the graph actually looks like this. Their assets are continuing to grow, but when you allow for purchasing power because of inflation, it's more of a flat line. So we always want to factor in inflation. Just up until this kind of bump in inflation that we've had in more recent years, what we tend to see is that first 10 years of someone's active retirement, that it was very rare for us to see a client actually come in and ask for more money. So one of the questions that we ask them is, how's your cash flow going? Your pension payment's high enough? All of these kind of things. It was very rare for someone to say to us, actually, we could do with another $500 a month or another $1,000 a month. Their spending would flatline, but what was happening behind the scenes is their lifestyle was slowing down as they got older. And so we factor in inflation to all of these numbers, but it's only been in more recent years where it's actually been happening, that people are taking more out each year. In the first 10 years that I did this job, no one took any more money out. If they were taking $80,000 a year 7 years ago, they're probably still taking $80,000 a year today. It's just that they're doing a little bit less because they're a little bit older.
Finding that your clients, when they pass on, that they're leaving around 2/3 of their nest egg to their dependents. Is that a true figure?
Yes. Yep. And if they get to this 20 times number, and as I said, a fair few people get there. Certainly the ones that we tend to work with. they're often dying with more dollars, maybe not purchasing power, but more dollars than what they retired with. You know, there's always a couple of clients that come to mind. There's one client that I catch up with him every 4 months, and his final comment to me at the end of every single review meeting for every year that I've been working with him is he tells me how much more money he has today than when he retired. And this guy's knocking on the door of 80. They've just downsized and moved into a retirement village unit, but he looks at the value of his house and the savings he's got and the balance of his super fund and all the rest of it, and totals all of that up, and he says, I've got however much more money today than what I did when I retired. So it's very rare that we see someone running out of money. The people that are running out of money, as you would expect, are those that are starting with a relatively low balance to begin with, but then spending probably more than what they can afford to do so, and then they end up on the full age pension and very little money left over in super. But yeah, really common for a lot of money to be left in tax. We don't have an inheritance tax in Australia. The only inheritance tax of sorts that exists is on superannuation benefits. And I didn't touch on it there, but one of the strategies that we look to try and implement for people once they are retired, when they're over 60 but under 75 and they've retired, is trying to deal with this tax that I'm about to explain. So your super benefits are made up of what's called a tax-free component and a taxable component. The tax-free component will go to whoever your beneficiary is, whether it's your partner, whether it's your children, whether it's some distant relative. They'll get that money tax-free. But the taxable component, if it's someone other than your partner, so if it's an adult child, if it's a brother or sister or a parent even for that matter, they'll have to pay up to 17% tax on inheriting that amount of money. Now, if someone's got $1 or $2 or $3 million in super, and if most of that's been accumulated during your working life, most of the balance is going to sit on that taxable side of things. And so it's not uncommon for us to do these numbers and say to someone, if you died tomorrow, your kids are going to be up for a $300,000 tax bill on inheriting the super that you've got. And so there is a strategy where you can pull money out and then you use those contribution limits that I was talking about to put it back in again. And if you start early enough and you live long enough, you can get pretty close to turning the whole balance over. And so we've got a lot of clients here that might have a couple of $1 million in super, but their kids will inherit that entirely tax-free. And so the home's inherited tax-free. So anything outside of super, you'll inherit that tax-free. But then depending on what it is that you've inherited, if the person that inherits then decides to sell that asset, they might have to pay some tax then. But it's not the inheriting of it that triggers the tax bill, it's the decision to later sell that may cause a tax. Yeah, so it's back to that $360,000, which uses up 3 years worth. Now that number increases over time too. It was a few years ago, it was 300 and then it became 330 and it's now 360. So every few years that does increase. But it's something that if this is an issue, and as part of our advice process, we'll identify if it's an issue, we want to start to implement that strategy as soon as we can. Because in order to do it, you have to be over 60 in the first place to get access to your super. And then once you turn 75, you can't contribute any more money to super anyway. It's just an age cap. It just stops. So you've got a 15-year window to try and turn it over. So it's $120,000 every year. So if you had an endless supply of money, you could keep putting in $120,000 every single financial year until your balance gets to $2 million. Once your balance gets to $2 million, that's it. You can't make any more of those contributions. You can do the $30,000 tax deductible one I was talking about, but these bigger 120 or 360 lump sums, once you get to 2 million, that's it, you're stopped. And again, that's another number that increases. So it was 1.9 and from the 1st of July, it's gone up to 2 million. So that'll keep increasing over time too.
So if you put the lump sum in at 360, you've got to wait a couple of years before you can do another.
It's 3 financial years. So if you did it today, if you put in 360 today, you're using up all of this financial year, all of next financial year, all of the 3rd financial year, and then in whatever the next one is after that, then you start again. You start from zero. Provided your balance is under $2 million, you can keep doing that. Yeah, so it's made up of what was the concessional contributions that you put in, plus any growth in your balance, and that's the bit that's a little bit sneaky. So if you put in this 120 that we're talking about, it's a non-concessional, that's fixed at a dollar amount. Any growth in the balance of your super fund just because of good returns all goes on the taxable side of the equation. It's not prorated. Once you start a pen, we're getting ultra into the detail here, but bear with me. Once you start a pension, that changes it so that any movements in your balance thereafter are prorated. They go up and down with the proportions of what's in taxable and tax-free. But up until you start a pension, concessional contributions plus any growth are on that side of the equation. So it's most common for us to see people that have 80 to 90% of their super balance, even if they have put a bit of after-tax money in, the vast majority of it sits on the taxable side, and it's a tax that's just ticking down for someone to eventually have to pay. There'll continue to be changes to the superannuation system. As the system evolves, as there's more money in there, you know, we're starting to reach kind of this kind of mass retirement baby boomer type generation, and there's, you know, $4 trillion or something in super right now. So the rules will continue to change. I think the one thing that you can rely on is that it will continue to be the lowest tax environment for you to save and provide for your retirement. It may not always be completely tax-free. There may be some, you know, this $2 million that I'm talking about in the pensions. Only 4 or 5 years ago, you could have as much money as you possibly wanted. Like, we've had clients here that had $15 million in a self-managed super fund and not paying $1 of tax on any of the earnings or any of the money that's coming out to them each year, and they're taking $800,000 a year in pension payments out. And so, you know, the government's put some limits on that kind of thing to that extreme with these caps. There'll continue to be more changes like that. But the reason why I'm confident that it will continue to be the lowest tax rate environment for you is the government needs some means to encourage people to save for their own retirement. As much as people say they're going to save and so forth, we don't. People tend to spend the money that's in their bank account, and sure, there's an odd outlier that's a really good saver. But if we're not encouraged to save through these tax concessions, no one's going to, or they're going to save at far lower rates than what they currently do. We have more people on the age pension, and we can't afford to pay more people on the age pension than what we already do. So there will always be a lot of concession around the super system. So the government's doing more and more to tighten up on super. You know, the $15 million example that I gave before, they don't want to see that kind of thing. So they in a roundabout way, they want to see these tax concessions and these tax limits at a modest level that they determine they think is an appropriate level to fund a reasonable retirement. And then over and above that, they just ask that people pay a bit of tax on it. So, like around the investment property, we do that. We look at that often, and it's, you know, sell it when you've stopped working, so your income's lower, therefore your capital gains tax is lower, and then use those concessional super contributions to help reduce the tax bill down. So, you can potentially sell investment property and not pay very much tax at all, and get a whole lot of money in super, tax-free concessions, and then you go again from there. It's just about restructuring it at the right time. So for those at the back that might not have heard, the question was just about, could I explain how the downsizing rule works? So the downsizing rule is a set of concessions or super contributions that are available to people over the age of 55 that have owned the property for more than 10 years and they decide to sell it. Now, you don't have to be living in that property. You just have to have some point lived in that house. So it may have been your first house and then you've still got it when you're 55 years old now and you lived in it for a few years right in the very beginning. You have to get at least a partial concession for CGT for selling that property because you lived in it. So you have to have lived in it at some point, get a partial concession, be over the age of 55, and then if you do that, you can contribute up to $300,000 to superannuation from the sale of that property. If you have a partner, your partner can do the same thing. Your partner does not have to be on the name, doesn't have to be on the title. So one person can own the property and not the other, but both of them are able to use these concessions. And that's an additional $300,000 each, or for a couple, $600,000 that they can put into super over and above those limits that I was talking about there before. So you can then really take that to the extreme where I was saying before, if you did contributions in June, contributions in July, for two members of a couple, you're getting nearly $1 million into super just through the ordinary contributions. And then if you've done the downsize as well, it's another $600,000. So depending on where the money's come from, you can get nearly $1.6 million into superannuation within the space of a fortnight, and over and above whatever you had there. So getting up to these $2 million and beyond, it's not without it's not without kind of reality. A lot of people are able to do that if they're selling assets at certain times. All right. Yeah, we'll maybe take one more and then we'll just do some questions afterwards as we kind of hang around. Yeah, go on.
Can I just clarify?
Yeah.
When someone asks a question?
Yeah.
Do both members of the couple need to be
So you have to be over 55 to do the downsizer, yes. So if the other person of the couple isn't over 55, they can't. You still got the ordinary contribution limits. They both still have the ordinary contribution limits, but you can't use the downsizer. So you do have to be over 55 to be able to do it. And then the last thing actually that I didn't mention there is you have to make that contribution to your super fund within 90 days of settlement, not when you sign the contract, of 90 days of when you got the cash in the bank. But the ATO is very lenient on that. We've had clients come in that sold the property ages ago and didn't even know about the downsizer, and we just call the ATO and they give them an extension and put the money in. But you have to get the extension first.
So, can I just on that? Sorry, I was asking.
It's okay.
So, you've got a portfolio of investment properties.
Yep.
Move out of your principal place of residence and start living in investment properties for 6 months. And then, as you're selling those investment properties, you can
Yeah.
take advantage of the downside.
You can, but you can only ever do it once.
Oh,
It's not over and over, and you also don't get a tax deduction for the 600,000 or the 300,000 either. So still subject to tax, but you can only ever use it once. And if you don't use your full 300,000, bad luck. You can't use 200 on one house and then 100 on another house. It's use it once, use it or lose it. So look, your feedback forms, and there's a few people starting to leave. Your feedback forms, you either give it to one of us. There's some people outside here. Drop off your feedback forms and we'll gather them up for you. But if anyone's got any other questions, we'll also hang around for a few more questions too. Thank you all for coming. Thanks.